We offer you Media Mothership. Media Mothership, designed to reveal the aporias of today for 1 hour of difference. What are you waiting for? Hop on the Media Mothership.
All right, welcome to Media Mothership. Just a random opening tune there that I put together that just keeping everyone on their toes. We are streaming on YouTube and Twitch now. As always, this is your host, Craig, joined now by two co-hosts, Angus. I guess I've promoted you to a co-host.
A couple of times, yeah.
This is your third show. Co-host, that's what I did with you, Taylor.
Yeah.
Suddenly, yep, you just got promoted. So you
I'm back.
are back. So last 2 weeks we've been doing deep dives into Angus's brain and thinking process. We started with the thesis on Twin Peaks and proto-mythologies, Asmo mythologies. It was close.
It's relatively close. Are you within a ballpark? It's about media as a spiritual experience, media reenchantment, and the remythologizing of the world.
That's it.
There you go. You'll get there eventually.
Yes.
Maybe I should just give it to you and you can read it.
You should. Yeah, we'll turn it into an audiobook.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Your soothing voice.
Exactly.
You
Half
can
an
laugh
hour.
throughout it. It would be sick.
Why haven't we entered that market? So yes, mythologizing and reenchantment. And then last week we dove into your background with video essay making and explored the tensions around work and life, the emotional and the celebrity theories like the parasocial.
The parasociality of making video essays and then
Yeah.
having friends watch it, and then they're like, "Oh, I remember when you said that." I'm like, "I didn't actually say that to you, bro. I'm in front of you. You're thinking of digital, Angus."
And various interesting fandoms that have connected with your work, the conspiracy angle, the political leanings, the use of it as comfort material to fall asleep to, which is unusual for the content and nature of your work, which is very controversial, very provocative.
Yeah,
Actually, rather than controversial, provocative.
Let's go
right?
controversial and provocative. That's polite. Yeah.
So today, I wanted to take a bigger picture because both of you guys have done honours thesis work. We're all in a research. Our minds, similar times and moment, have been research oriented. So we're going to look at a broader question around this idea of asking questions of popular culture and how we can ask better questions in terms of engaging with popular culture fields out there. I know last week, Angus, you were talking about popular culture provides a wonderful space to explore really problematic issues through. It can be a environment where you can raise controversies or divisive or polarizing issues that normally would make people maybe run for the hills. But because you're talking in the context of Silent Hill film or the Saw films, suddenly you'll find you're in conversation with communities and groups and minds in a way that maybe with other content they would not. So we're going to look at this question of asking better questions and start maybe with the easy starting point, which is, what is that difference between watching or engaging with something and analyzing it? Really that difference between just reading a movie review of Twin Peaks or a TV review of Twin Peaks and instead saying, no, this is analysis of this thing.
Oh, it's a bit of a terrific question, isn't it? It's sort of like, where do you even start? Because it's such a... You said it was simple, but I think it's an incredibly difficult thing to even sort of... It's intensely personal, I find. So maybe I can pull from my own personal experience for a little bit. Sometimes I find that I will watch something just because I'm bored, or I'm looking for something to comfort me in a moment where I'm sad, perhaps. And that sort of is a very in-the-moment kind of entertainment. I feel like you're doing it to sort of satiate a level of like some sad juice in your brain, I suppose. But I suppose like the analysis side of it is a long-term relationship with the artwork. I feel like that probably what happens is you turn it off and then you have to like sort of double down on your consumerism a little bit. You have to go look up who made it, what their influences were, why they made certain choices, and you sort of have to begin the process of kind of, let's say, disenchanting the initial magic of that artwork to try and understand what you think it's really about. I suppose. So I think it's like low-key, it's kind of a realm of self-discovery in a way that's sort of tricky to describe.
I mean, there was an interesting article I came across about someone who decided they were working from home. So this is a bit of a stretch, but if you can go with me. So they're working from home, remote working, and they decided, how about if I remote work in from Skyrim, right?
Okay, hell yeah.
They set up, they've got a video essay where they document this, right? They say, okay, I'm a huge Skyrim player. In Skyrim, with VR goggles, you can go into this environment. And so he thought, okay, I need to find a space within Skyrim where I can sit down and bring up my spreadsheets and do my job. And so he was looking at various biomes. There was an underwater one. I've not played Skyrim. You're a Skyrim player, Taylor? Yeah. And again, that idea of moving from a space, right? I mean, it seems like fun at first. Was what we were left with this video essay. It seems like a fun idea at first. Going to Skyrim, what couldn't be more exciting than that? A rather boring, banal part of life, which is logging in, doing a 9-to-5 kind of spreadsheet-oriented job. But what if you're sitting in an underwater world space? But, of course, full of distractions, right? Full of this idea of distractions, of things which are going to get in the way of actually conforming to your job role.
Dragons.
Dragons. Yeah, dragons.
Some skeletons.
Skeletons.
You know?
But I was thinking, if you code shift that, so yes, while, so the question, the difference between watching something and analyzing it. So there is a difference between playing Skyrim according to Skyrim's rules and logging in and doing it. It is a completely different experience when you log into Skyrim as someone wanting to remote work from home and do your job. But there are moments where I'm thinking here of those guys that did the Hamlet performances in GTA.
Yeah.
So that was getting a lot of media coverage, that these guys during COVID decided they were out of work, they were no longer doing Hamlet and Shakespeare. So how about if, as everyone's online, why don't we see if we can say, hey, at this time, at this specific location within GTA Online, which is a kind of Odeon theater mock-up, similar space, we're going to perform it, right? So again, similar to that idea of the guy wanting to do their job in Skyrim, but instead wanting to perform Hamlet. And that got turned into, I think Netflix ran with it or something, there's a documentary piece on it. That really turned into a newsworthy phenomena where there are clips of them beginning Hamlet, and then people will spawn in and sit there and perform good audience, right? Watch it. So that, again, that idea of the difference between watching something and analyzing or interacting with it. So they're watching, they're good. But then it was really exciting when people showed up with guns and started shooting everyone. And they still tried to perform the role. One of them was saying, "Oh, I'm shot." And then he'd say the lines of Horatio or something.
Yeah.
And then you'd hear police sirens in the background.
Is this a dagger I see before me? No, it's a silenced AK-47.
And again, that idea of suddenly shifting from those modes of engagement, all that, almost that kind of, what is good consumption to bad consumption, but that, that emergent gameplay moment, that moment where something unexpected occurs and it makes what was a rather pedestrian A to Z painting by numbers exercise, yet again another performance of Hamlet, but because it was in GTA Live, it was special. I've always wanted to do this radio show, for instance, in Roblox.
You know what? I'll support your dream. Next episode, let's
you.
go.
I don't.
Why wouldn't that work? Because that's my next question. Would that destroy the joy of something, right? Because the Skyrim guy, arrived at that conclusion that really, in terms of trying to do work from home in Skyrim, it just, it evaporates the joy of Skyrim.
It's an interesting little thing you bring up because I think about that a fair bit. I'm currently working on this like deeply insane video essay on this movie called The Zone of Interest, which is basically this like, I think I was explaining it to Craig off camera the other week, where it's kind of this, it's a quaint little melodrama set in the middle of Auschwitz. So it's like Rudolf Hess and his family, and like, oh no, someone cut my flowers. And then you hear gunshots from across the wall, and you're like, oh my God, I'm in the middle of Auschwitz. Why am I worrying about these teeny tiny things? And it's kind of this whiplash nightmare of a movie. But through the process of working on this video essay, I realized I can't view it as a movie anymore. Like, I kind of had to get a friend in to be like, how does this make you feel? Because I no longer see it as like a piece of art. I see it as this ball of weird theories on the banality of evil and the psychology of genocide, or like X, Y, and Z. And it's kind of like, I do think that like looking too hard into something can kind of completely ruin the magic of how something, the sort of the mysticism of how something really captures your attention. But at the same time, like, we were talking about this example the other week where like there's something really marvelous about like the behind the scenes box set of like the Lord of the Rings, where like you see that and you're like, hang on, I reckon I could work in the film industry. So the act of like learning more about how something was made can kind of change your life in that way. And I'm not entirely sure what the difference between those two things is, I suppose. I guess I'm not like getting into the video essay industry to ruin my ambitions to be a Nazi, I suppose. So like, so it's like, I guess I'm not coming to these two different things for those reasons.
Yeah.
Why do you think that like, where's the divergence point between those two things?
Well, there's two things that I find really interesting there. One is that idea of, if you see how the sausage is made in the sausage factory, one of the common discourses is you then become a vegetarian, because you realize all the horrible things they put in a sausage, right? And this is what, who was it? Simon Cottle, or I think it was Nick Coldry. One of those, Coldry or Cottle, their research on fans that went to the Coronation Street TV show filming and interviewed them. And he said he was amazed. He was expecting a lot of fans would go to the making of, behind the scenes, televised drama and come away realizing, the actors are a lot shorter, right? Like people say when they meet Tom Cruise, he's a tiny guy. And that's that kind of sausage factory moment, right? Where it kind of removes the mythology of something and you say, actually, it's not special. So he was assuming people would confront that reality, that media is fake and it's all made up, and the power it has over us, if you want to go in a kind of propaganda model, can be evaporated. There's moments where you realize it's all fake. But he said his research showed the opposite.
But then you have to remember, Jamie Oliver went into US schools. And did the whole school lunch thing where he showed them what went into chicken nuggets, which was bone, gristle, fat, and things like that. And then at the end of it, he's like, he made a chicken nugget and said, okay, so who wants to eat it? The whole class put their hands up.
Isn't there?
To be fair, chicken nuggets are pretty good.
Look, it's interesting. I think there's a Folding Ideas video essay on Jamie Oliver's show, because that is such a. I mean, look, that's a great example of, I guess good consumerism, cultural capital. It's performing all those moves of, are you a good or bad consumer? And again, as you're saying, Jamie Oliver goes to the US with this mantra of, I'm going to shift the US health school system to good healthy eating and show that you can create healthy eating cheaply. But he's disappointed to find out that the kids want the bad food.
Yeah, they want the end product.
But I think there's some it was. I mean, the Folding Idea one, I have to listen to it again, but the Folding Ideas one is interesting because his premise is Jamie Oliver's asking the wrong ideas, or wrong questions about pop culture. He's asking the wrong questions about fast food. He's setting it up with a false premise that, of course these ingredients cost this much. He does something where he breaks down the actual costs and kind of shows that this is actually more expensive than he's assuming in terms of how much it would cost to get healthy food and so forth. And so, yeah, I find it again, to arrive at that endpoint, it is interesting when people seem to still want the bad thing or see the magic of cinema as still magical, even though they've seen the behind the scenes making of. Because I know you were talking once about an example where you, Taylor, during COVID, joined a K-pop performance digitally.
Yeah.
Which seems to be not fun, right? In terms of going to a live concert. How did you find that experience? Was that one that brought you great joy?
As I said, it was fun. It was great fun. Because they had these massive screens that the idols could see and respond to. So you could talk to them. Of
you? Like, do you have a webcam?
No, it was just a...
I just text. Should be a web camera. Yeah. That would have been hilarious.
There was like 20,000 people that went to it. So.
Well, because it does bring... I mean, because one of the questions that I had about what are the right questions to ask of pop culture is that idea that do good questions come from moments where you're confused or obsessed or really uncomfortable and have that level of discomfort? And then you've got to find out why. Why is my body and mind reacting in this way? Why do I feel so confused? Because
That's really interesting. I think a lot about this as well. There is, how do I even phrase? I have so many faults. Do you ever like try and run through a door and 50 other people are trying to run through that same door at the same time? You're like, which one of us is going to go first? But, there's a lot to go on there. I think I was telling you about this book earlier that I've read recently, Craig. It's this book from like 1843. It's called Either or by this guy named Søren Kierkegaard. I went to a conference recently, and after my talk, one of the people who were at my conference was like, "Hey, have you ever read this book?" And then I read it, and then it's kind of ruined my life so much that I've gone and read a bunch of articles and anthologies, just trying to completely understand this thing, because it just like made me feel so strange. In essence, basically, how does one even begin to explain Søren Kierkegaard? I think the best way to explain him is that he was so afraid of God that he accidentally invented existentialism. So like he was just like so worried about original sin that he was like, oh my God, I have to make all these choices and this is horrible. And then like Sartre and Ponty and all of these French people were like, yo, this is sick and this is excellent and I love it.
Because I often hear that term existential and having an existential crisis. I hate to ask you to pin it down. Could you pin it down though? What is existentialism? It's
right. Okay. Media scholar. That's right.
No. It was never. It was never on my read list.
I sort of tend to bounce between disciplines, So like I know a bit about the philosophy stuff. Existentialism sort of arose after the de-emphasis of the church, I suppose. Okay. Sort of people trying to make meaning after, there's no longer the 10 Commandments to live after. Yes. I have to be the arbiter of my own destiny, and that's kind of like there's an existential weight to that, where you're just kind of like, oh my God, how the hell am I supposed to do anything like that? Outside of anyway, so like sort of moving on from that, right? That in essence, that's what that is, especially after like Nietzsche declared God to be dead. Like, how do I build a new morality after the de-emphasis of the church, more or less? But then it's okay. So this book, right? It's difficult to talk about because it's already deeply ironic. So he wrote his doctoral thesis on like Socratic irony, and he's being ironic about having to be ironic. And apparently, like, I was reading about how his assessors were kind of like, this is impenetrable. You're really clever, but I don't want to read this. This is so unpleasant. But basically, so he's writing from this. It's kind of epistolary, which means it's kind of written as a series of letters between two characters. So the first character is this. He's a young guy. He's a young guy, and he's just obsessed with art. And he's like, art is all that matters. God doesn't matter. I want to learn about Faust. I want to think about goddamn Sophocles. I want to think about Mozart. That's all I want to think about, because it's the 1840s. And he's really rich. That's the subtext. Didn't have superheroes yet. But then the second character is this sort of curmudgeonly old judge, and he's a very religious old man. He's shaking his thumb at the end of all of his letters, basically. So the nature of the book is that basically what happened is that Kierkegaard saw an opera named Don Giovanni, which is, Don Juan, and he was kind of like, do I love God or Mozart more now? And it's kind of this 600-page existential crisis, sort of trying to unpack a lot of these themes that we've been talking about. So he writes this essay. It's something called like The Musical Erotic or something. And he's trying to he's in this book and he's engaging in all of these weird compromises that are really familiar to me as someone who thinks way too much about artworks today. So Don Juan is obviously this character who is this serial seducer, and he doesn't live by God's values. But Mozart, he really killed it with the orchestra, and it's really pretty, and it's really, it's beautiful.
Right.
So so what does he do when he's trying to square the fact that he's an extremely religious man who is deeply afraid of God with the fact that he's really enjoying this story about a deeply unethical character?
So is this similar to crises people face today with Rolf Harris?
You know what, Rolf Harris
Cosby.
really goes off on Twitter. But yeah, Bill Cosby.
Bill Cosby, J.K. Rowling, right? These cancelled authors.
It is the progenitor of what do I do with this monster artist. I'm sure there are earlier examples, because religious people are the most articulate people when it comes to guilt and art. It is the most amazing thing. Sure, you have to understand who Abraham and Isaac are, but goddamn it, it's really worth it. So what does he do when he's trying to rationalize this deeply immoral piece of artwork?
Yes.
Well, he kind of engages in all of these little mental compromises. He's kind of he gets into some media theory, which I think is really interesting. He's kind of it's sung and not written, and there's different semiotics to that. And, there's sort of moral virtues to the fallen women, in quotation marks. Sex work isn't bad. But, he's a deeply religious man. And, oh my God, I really wish I had it in front of me and I could just write down everything. But he's sort of, this character that he's written, it's certainly based upon him and his own ruminations. But he's kind of displaying it on the page to sort of ridicule it a little bit.
Yes.
So he's sort of being this, at the end, it sort of reaches this fevered pitch of him losing his mind over something that doesn't really matter. And we're supposed to see it as rather disturbing, more or less. And then he has all of these essays about Sophocles and Antigone and Faust. And you sort of get this idea that this is a character, this is someone who has made so many ethical compromises in his life that he's never actually stood by anything in particular. He's just sort of going with the social flows of certain things. And then you contrast that with this sort of religious, ultra-virtuous judge character, and he's kind of no, you've lived a life absent of compromise. You need to pick either being an aesthetic person who believes in science and God, in Mozart and science, or you need to be a godly person who believes in scripture. You've gotten this far and you don't believe in anything because you've not made any choices. So pick now. Pick now between the aesthetic life or the religious life. And he certainly is, he's being a little bit of a hater towards Hegel, because Hegel's whole thing was sort of synthesizing deeply complicated philosophical positions. So he's no, don't do that. We are just going to goddamn pick either or. Now, what's really interesting to me about that book is
Does he pick either?
Well, it's ambiguous because he's being deeply ironic, but I think his sympathies go a little bit more towards the religious guy. Now, it's fair to say that Kierkegaard didn't forever abstain from listening to operas for the rest of his life, so he sort of sees this whole thing as a bit absurd. But what's really amazing to me about that book is that I'm not religious, I'm not spiritual, I don't believe in the validity of God, so the actual choice of choosing between either or is a fallacy to me. But I do a little bit of either or when it comes to a monster artist.
Yeah.
Right? I do that. I'm okay.
Is there an example of a monster artist?
I was giving you this example.
Please.
I wrote this essay about this black metal musician named Burzum. So black metal is this deeply strange movement from the 90s. It's an offshoot of death metal, and it is the most incomprehensible, screaming, terribly recorded music you ever heard in your life.
We'll have to see if we've got any on Edge Radio.
Yeah, we probably do.
Yeah. This is from Norway or whatever. But Burzum he's a murderer. He murdered a guy in the 90s, and then he became a really fervent Nazi.
It's not good.
Do you remember Kanye? Do you remember Kanye West anti-Semitic crash out a couple of years ago? There's the photo of him, and he has the silver braces over his teeth. Have you seen that photo?
I think
so. And was he tweeting that he loved Hitler or
something?
Oh
yeah, big time. Anyway, so he's wearing a Burzum shirt. And then Burzum is on Twitter being you know what? Kanye is asking all the right questions. You know that this guy sucks. But I decided, I remember listening to it years ago and I didn't like it because it was before I really got into heavy metal stuff. I revisited it recently, and I was like, oh, dear God, this goes unbelievably hard.
So you enjoyed it?
I really
you found yourself liking it?
It is beyond me liking it. It is me seeing a bunch of artists that I really love and where they got their ideas from. It's like me discovering the Sorcerer's
And their
Stone.
ideas are bad.
No, their ideas
sources are
because the artwork
problematic.
itself is awesome. It's just the guy who made it sucks.
Right.
And then like
so separating the art and the artist?
Yes, not even separating the art from the artist because that guy sucks and I don't care about a single thing he has to say.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It's not like a J.K. Rowling where like, I mean, I grew up on those books. Not to make you feel old, Craig, but like I grew up on those books, and I'm sure that there's one or two ethical ideas that I got from J.K.
Harry
Rowling.
Potter.
Yeah, exactly.
TV series, new TV series around the corner, so it continues to this day.
And it's not like, oh, I once held this person in esteem, and then she's kind of fallen.
Right.
I never respected Burzum, and I think he's still a prick. But then you sort of find an affinity for something, and you're like, oh my God, what do I do? Do I want to be an aesthetic person and disregard everything, or do I want to be an ethical person and stop listening to it?
Yes.
Right? And it's such an interesting lens to try and
Because do you feel, I mean, that ethical question is, if you, in conversation, say you like Burzum?
Burzum, yes.
Burzum's
So like,
music, then people might think you endorse Burzum.
So this is the thing where it's like, if I ever see someone wearing a Burzum patch in public, there's two options. One, they are the most racist man I've ever seen in my entire life.
Red flag.
Or two, he is the coolest guy you've ever seen in your life, and he knows it's all bullshit.
Green flag.
Green flag, exactly.
So that's problematic, isn't it? That it's a kind of, what is it, a cognitive dissonance, right? Suddenly, as the person decoding someone, you've got two opposing ideas in the same time in your mind, wrestling, going, well, do I continue this date with this person? Because they might be the green flag type of Burzum supporter who gets music, right? Or it could be the red flag who is a Nazi and endorses murder.
Exactly, but then like it's going back to this either-or thing. It's this binary that completely predates a spectrum of
that's an
interpretation.
Assumption. Yeah, and that's problematic, right? Either or as a framework through which to assess value has some values, has some good things about it, but also it can mean you get stuck down very dead ends, or it can mean you're not going to think of other things.
Well, the thing is, like,
right? It's not grayscape.
Yeah. Sorry, like I find that book really confronting because
And what was the book again? It was called...
It's called Either or. Either/or from 1843. I find it confronting just because I do so much of it with so many media properties that I engage with.
So you find it quite a useful framework?
The thing is, I don't find the framework, all human behavior is either or. That's silly. Okay. And that's nonsensical. It's like saying everything is black or white and then you miss the rainbow.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's silly.
Nicely put.
But nonetheless, it's still provocative because I do worry about various artworks. Like we were just talking before about this movie that came out a couple of years ago called
Late Night with
the Devil. Thank you for remembering
Australian horror.
Australian horror movie. They shot it for about $1 million, and it's pretty good. It's pretty funny. It's kind of Sam Raimi-esque. You know what I mean? They're doing the horror. They're doing the comedy. They're doing some crazy stuff with cameras. But it sort of came out with a couple of post-production. They ran out of money. They needed some more artwork, so they AI generated it when it was kind of a new thing. And they sort of said it was a new technology. We didn't realize it'd be such a big deal. I'm of the position, generally, you could probably pay someone a couple $100 if you're making a goddamn movie out of your own budget to, make something. But you know what? It is different from when, Marvel made Secret Invasion, and they generated that entire opening sequence.
Secret Wars.
Secret Wars, whatever it was.
That's right, and the entire opening theme montage... opening credit thing was
terrible.
It was terrible. But yeah, look, I mean, and that was for me, what's interesting about these moments is I have to turn it into discourse analysis to de-escalate my own emotional investment in it. And it is interesting what arguments win out. Or, again, I was looking at Arjuna Pradharai, who describes it as tournaments of value, where you see these rage wars on Twitter or Reddit as people with trolling views or opposing views or, just battle it out in terms of what eventuates as a status quo. For the moment with Late Night with the Devil, one of the discourses around it was that defense that, look, in their defense... These guys are startup producers, early filmmakers, oil, smell of an oily rag, putting it together. It's not Marvel, right? No. Marvel, the sense is, the premise there, I guess, is Marvel deserves the criticism because it has money to burn and should pay artists.
Yeah.
Low budget production people don't have as much money to burn and therefore could get some slack. That was the discourse. That discourse held a lot of sway. Again, what's interesting, you were showing me a review. It was a review.
Oh, yeah. So, like, when I sort of try to start to explain all the stuff that I've been researching, why I've been away from the YouTube channel for so long.
Yeah.
Well, like,
is it a year ago you last?
Oh, so the last video I made was, like, in September of 2024. Which is nightmarish, because I used to be so goddamn quick, but, sometimes it takes a little while to make something that's good. And it takes a little while to try and research something. But it's this thing that I've noticed, this sort of like not even commodification, it's just this crystallization of moral value within the form of media consumption. That it's beyond being like, oh, this is the good album and this is the bad album, and I'm a good person because I listened to the good album. It's this sort of like battlefield of
virtue signaling.
Yeah, it's beyond virtue signaling, it's soul.
Right.
But it's like media consumption, and it's a deeply strange, obviously, so like my honors thesis is a teeny tiny part of what it will be eventually be a larger project,
which we're hoping to get in the Morris Miller Library. So
yes, we still haven't gotten it. I need to call up Rufus Black and be like, listen here, Rufus, mate, what are you doing?
Escalate.
Yeah, I'm gonna harangue Rufus.
He's a friend of the show, so
sorry, Rufus. That was satire. But yeah, it's this. I mean, it's a thing that's been around for much longer than the internet. So, like, in my sort of book, I cite a couple of examples from earlier in, like, I'm not going to say history, the 20th century. Like, I sort of cite the backlash against a book called Eichmann and Jerusalem.
Right.
This is a philosopher named Hannah Arendt, and she wrote this book on the banality of evil, where Adolf Eichmann was tried by the state of Israel, and Miss Arendt, who was a famous philosopher, came along, and her innovation was being like, oh, he was kind of boring. And then everyone hated it. That's a drastic simplification of what actually happened, because she said some problematic things. But a lot of people back then, like, she had lifelong friends who cut her off while refusing to read the book. Which is a crazy thing to me. Like, you have like a mentor figure, someone who refuses to read your book, and he's like, I'm never speaking to you again. I hope you die. Bye.
It's interesting, right? Yeah, because is that moment where you feel discomfort, is that your mind and body telling you, just walk away? Just cut your losses, walk away? Or is it, think harder? Push through it, think harder, wrestle with it, get some therapy.
Yeah, so like so we come back to this problem. So we're talking
talk to everyone you know about it.
So we talk about this problem where it's like, how do we engage with media in a clever way? And there is this kind of problem where, we are in a system that encourages constant, ravenous, endless consumption, where it's like we are good people and we are good consumers and we're intelligent people if we spend more money and we spend more time watching things and we spend more time thinking about things. But how do we sort of like step away from that and actually derive like a level of like active personhood and a healthy relationship with consumption from that? Because I stress and I worry that we sort of use these things to identify ourselves within an incredibly oversaturated marketplace of ideas, essentially. And we're like, okay, these are the good things that I identify myself with. And I'm clever because I'm deferring to the brand goodness of these particular things. And so that's how I stake my claim and I refuse to move it. And then we sort of worry about whether those people might have problematic views, and then that infringes upon our brand value, essentially.
It's interesting because I do feel at one level you've got difficult emotions you're juggling with, right? Guilt and compromise, this need to justify why you like something or not, or why do you listen to K-pop, just as an example, right? Or why don't you like Psy, right? Why won't you let me play Psy more on radio, right?
I think I have been so like unsocialized. I don't get any of that.
Oh, you don't feel any, like, if someone says, Why do you like K-pop? You don't need that justification.
I don't need to justify anything just because I like it. I like Harry Potter. I don't need to justify anything about that.
But there's. I was listening to this podcast, and I think it was politics or philosophy. Anyway, they were saying you're entitled to your opinion as long as you can defend it, right? As long as you can put some arguments forward as to why you have that opinion, you're totally entitled to it. But if you can't put any, and I guess the premise of that is what happens if you can't put arguments together to justify your opinion,
justification is I like something.
Is that good enough, right?
In that argument, I don't need to analyse behind the mental processes of people behind it. So people who are not going to consume your content on Media Mothership because one time 400 episodes ago, you said something racist, which probably happened at some point.
God damn it, Craig. Why would you say that? What the hell, Craig?
It was CJ that would have done that. I do think, well, I guess the question then is, setting it back one step withdrawn, would be, why do some people feel the need to justify what they watch and listen?
Because they're socialised to the point where they need to justify it to the
There's an insecurity, a defensiveness.
Yeah.
Judgment. It is a judgmental culture, it feels. And if we look at, again, video essays often arrive, we were talking about, from those emotions of confusion or obsession or discomfort. There is a vulnerability there, which means if you can't justify or work your way through that feeling, there's some ethical issue, right? Maybe there's a judgment. You're not winning the cultural cap. You're not going to get the cultural capital points. You're not going to get the tournament of value. You're not going to win that.
But is this something that only came about recently? Because if you think about it, then how would a novel like Lolita become one of the greatest novels ever written if you then had to analyse what the person was thinking behind it all the
Might
time?
I draw an analogy here?
Sure.
This is the first time I've met you.
Hi.
But hi there. You're so handsome. One of the big things that I'm rather interested in is the conspiracism. Mm-hmm. Not as a cooker, but as just a casual observer and an onlooker, and being like, y'all are weird. but often, it's a thing that's existed for a very long time, right? Tacitus is a Roman historian, and he wrote about how, when the great fires of Rome happened, people blamed Nero for starting the fires. When in reality, the most likely thing is that someone tipped over a candle.
Yeah.
Big event needs a big cause, and conspiracism just exists. Or there are conspiracy theories about the great fires of London as well. I don't know why it's always fires with these people. Maybe this is before television, this is what we had.
Yeah.
But conspiracism has kind of always existed. But with the internet, we just see it more now. Conspiracy theories used to either be in teeny tiny little, venue halls or in bars with some weird bloke in the back of a bar, or it was at your coffee table. But now we kind of just, we see it all online all the time, and we've always had a drive towards conspiracism. I would suggest that something similar, this sort of impulse towards let's call it a Protestant ethic drive towards optimal ethical consumption regarding media, has kind of always existed, but because we have the internet, we see it a bit more now. So the Lolita example, which is what sparked my imagination. Nabokov was a victim of everything that he wrote about in the book. He wasn't a guy. It was bro, Humbert, he's my man. He gets me. I love this guy. He's my favorite zany goon. He wasn't like that,
Because the main character is a creepy predator.
Oh, he's a remarkably creepy predator. But it's satire. He's writing about it to sort of criticize. There's a line in that book where he's like, "Gee whiz, I sure love being in Colorado. The age of consent laws. Oh, they're so loose."
Because I think people miss the. I was reading a list, top 10 films people misunderstand. Lolita came up, and the argument they put forward in that list is people misunderstand Lolita's meaning because they think it's all about the sexualization of young kids, but it's really about a creepy man, right? That they misidentify the main issue, the main person, from being this is an indictment of creepy men to instead sexualized
Sexualization of small children. Like, there is an amazing essay by Claire Derrida. She wrote a book called Monsters: What to Do with Problematic Artists.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, you might really like this book.
Yeah.
No, I'm not calling you a monster. That wasn't the same. But like, she has an essay on Nabokov, and like, I didn't know that much about him before. You know, I didn't know that he was a victim of what he had written about. But and like, he seemed to have kept his hands to himself and been polite to most people in his life. I'm sure he said a couple of off-color things in his time. But it basically concludes that essay being like, the distance between you feel between Lolita and yourself is that, like, you're not supposed to understand her because she's objectified.
Yes.
And the book is kind of about the horror, about that a lot of men just kind of feel those feelings and never interrogate themselves. But the problem is, like, then actually having to confront that and actually having to deal with that is, you know, it's risk averse to a lot of people because they don't want to have to think about that. You know, like, if we go back to the Hannah Arendt example, we kind of need these Eichmanns to be these larger-than-life characters because big cause, big reason. And it helps us make a lot of sense out of the cognitive dissonances that we feel over, like, the mass bureaucratization of the world. And I think that the only wrong answer that you can have towards this problem about, like, media literacy and popular culture is a refusal to look, I suppose. If you're the kind of person where, like, your favorite, I don't know, like a rock singer or whatever, and it turns out that he, let's say, was unkind to a woman.
Yeah.
I think the only wrong answer to that problem is not confronting it and blaming the woman. Because, like, you're not actually having to confront the fact that the dude did something wrong. You're just being like, okay, obviously it's a big conspiracy and that's a problem. I think there's probably other problems that you could pick up, but then we get back to this idea that we have this drive towards ethical consumption and we have to be good consumers. And I sort of think that a lot of it goes back to Max Weber's Protestant ethic a little bit.
Okay.
It's one of my more, my brand is Galaxy Brain Takes, by the way.
Galaxy.
Galaxy Brain Takes. So, like, we only have 10 minutes. Can I explain this? Well, I think I can, because when I did the CSAA, the Cultural Studies Association of Australia, I did manage to talk about this in about 20 minutes. So, okay, let's give this a go. Max Weber was he was one of the dudes who kind of invented sociology. Him and Emil Durkheim and some other chucklefucks from Europe, you know. But he was curious about how religious values transformed into economic values over time. So he sort of starts by asking this question of, like, why do we say that time is money? Like, it's a phrase that I heard my entire life without ever really critiquing what it was about. Essentially, his argument kind of starts with, like, okay, so Catholics have this drive towards... Ooh, what does he say? He has a great line. Big breath. You know, like, we have a certain amount of time on Earth. We're going to die one day. God gave us a certain amount of time on Earth, so we better get off our butts and do something. Because we can't just waste our lives sitting down doing nothing, right? So we have this drive to infuse our lives with meaning because God put us here for a reason. That was the Catholics. And then with the Protestant Reformation, in particular that of the Calvinists, and the Lutherans as well, he was kind of like, well, no, it's not that. They sort of changed it from being like, God gave you time on Earth. They're like, no, God gave you time on Earth, and yet you're sitting in squalor. You could be working. You could be making money to improve your circumstances. Get off your butt and go to work. Right? So that was his investigatory question. And then he has to... People call it the Protestant ethic. It probably should be called the Calvinist ethic, because he doesn't talk about Protestants for very long at all. He's kind of like, okay, first couple pages, and then we're going to go really deep into the Calvinist theology, which is great for me, because I think Calvinism is really funny, but we're not going to talk about that right now. That's next time.
Okay.
But basically, right, so he ends his essay, and people at home, if anyone wants to read anything by Max Weber, please read his final essay in the Protestant Ethic, because it is one of the greatest firecrackers I've ever seen in my entire life. It's pretty rare that I hoot and holler over academia. I sit on my bus and I'm like, whoa, let's go! You know, it's pretty rare that happens. But, like, his essay on, like, asceticism, he's kind of like, okay, so we have these religious values of not consuming, of asceticism, of deriving ethical value from not consuming things, from being hungry and abstaining from sex and eating, all that kind of stuff. But then how do we balance that with the consumer mania of capitalism? How do we do that when we need to we have to have this drive towards constant consumption, varied consumption, this sort of Fordist idea that, like, we are good citizens if we engage in luxury? So he's like, okay, how do we balance those two things? And his answer in like 1905, so it's changed a little bit since then. And obviously he wasn't referring to Ford because the T model wouldn't come out for a little while. I'm sort of I'm reanalyzing the canon of history there a little bit. Ignore that. But basically it's like, well, what we do is we engage in all these little ethical compromises. We're like, okay, I need to buy shoes because otherwise my feet will bleed. I'm going to buy my shoes from a place that gives a portion of their money to an orphanage. Or maybe they give a bit of their money to not a musician, that's not an athlete that I really like. Or, I really want to support my local economy, so I'm going to buy my bread from that place over there. And that way, when I'm buying something, I'm putting my money towards something that's kind of ethically sound. And by doing that, I can justify having to consume it, because I have to consume things to survive. And I sort of feel like, sort of in the book that I'm working on, I'm sort of attempting to sort of put a little bit of that either-or energy. That sort of this energy. I basically think Kierkegaard was kind of wrong because he was kind of afflicted with the Protestant ethic, more or less. He was just kind of like, I need to make the ethical choice, when in reality, bro should have like touched some grass, and he should have just been like, I'm probably overthinking this, and it's not really that serious, bro. But I feel that nonetheless, we are, as young people online, and we don't really, your early 20s are a horrible time to be alive because you don't really have a purpose. You finish university and you're like, what the fuck am I going to do? So you sort of like become a bit of an ascetic tyrant to your own body by being like, well, I have to be really stringent about the media, the things that I consume, whether it be films or books. And then I can use these little things to identify myself in an overcrowded environment. And then I can sort of act morally superior over people who don't even have the decency to feel guilt in their consumption.
Yeah, I mean, I do like that tension around ethical consumption, and maybe, yeah, I mean, I have some sympathy for your point, Taylor, about self-surveillance, right? At which point, I don't want to justify, right? I'm not behaving in a constant state of self-surveillance with that negative.
Life's too short to care what other people have to say.
And yeah, I mean, I guess the question is, when does that ethical consumption become self-surveillance? And by that kind of spectrum, I'm saying, where does it become something constructive to something potentially destructive, where you're surveying yourself in a way which is, I mean, you use the word, this tyranny word, which is actually less about, what's making me happy, what's enriching me, what am I getting joy out of, to instead, maybe an externally focused, how do I think people are seeing me? And how can I say the right things at the right time? And maybe that's also creeping in with a bit of dependency with ChatGPT type spaces where people are kind of deferring to that as, I don't know how to answer this without deferring to some system that will tell me, okay, here's an answer, which is going to be ethically consumable in a way, but then you want to hide that act, right? So, and this is, I guess, the Late Night with the Devil, right? That if you're using AI to get through with life, that is increasingly becoming a secretive act, right? You don't want to tell people you're using AI to do your essay or to create your music or to generate your little promo piece.
And then we could come to you and you use it for everything and you tell everyone about how you're using it for everything.
Well, there's so much. Yeah, look,
it's a tool though, right? It's like it's a thing that you can use to speed things along, especially if you're a busy person. It's like, so for instance, I use Photoshop a lot. And there is a tool in Photoshop where like you basically put a big box over the object that you want to cut out, cuts it out immediately. I don't have to spend 20 minutes manically trying to cut something out, and I just I need to get something done, and it's a job.
And it looks pretty good when it does that.
Yeah, it does. It's a pretty sophisticated tool. Adobe are evil, but god damn it, they really killed it with that tool. So I think that it's just a matter of degrees.
Well, isn't it was it Aristotle or Plato writing about the
golden mean?
Was it the invention of writing as a destructive act?
Plato hated it because he thought that it would ruin people's memories.
Yeah, and he wasn't wrong. I mean, the loss of oral culture meant the way of thinking orally was lost. I mean, you hear people talk about it now where They say, do you have difficulty remembering names? Well, in oral cultures, you imagine yourself going into a room, a house, you open the door, and in that door is the name, and this kind of memory act, which is oral culture thinking.
But under the same thing, if you met someone at a party and they said, "What's your name?" and you said Malcolm, and then they took out a notebook and wrote down Malcolm.
It would be considered.
Well, I think that's rather beautiful. I think that's kind of pretty. Oh, you really care about remembering my name?
Or are they a surveiller, right? They're like, I'm keeping notes on you.
It could be Death Note.
Creepy spy. Death Note, yeah. But yeah, again, that kind of media panic moment where it was like this invention, this technology, which now we see writing as an amazing thing that bequeathed to us Shakespeare, later on the press.
Which is now falling out of favour.
Shakespeare?
No. I mean writing.
Writing, yeah. So now the concern is... is writing degrading?
As a teacher, I can say it's falling out of favour. No one knows how to do it anymore.
Has people's writing degraded because keyboards and typing have basically supplanted, and we've lost the skill to write.
Yep. Kids, year 10, they can't write their names.
Cursive writing.
It's crazy.
Yeah, so you might really relate to this because I believe I heard that you're a teacher, correct?
Yes.
So when I was at the CSAA, I saw this amazing paper. I cannot remember the name of the author. I really wish I could shout her out because her paper really articulated something that I was really trying to work on. I think a bit of context behind this is that I got my marks on the day I gave my paper, right? So I did my paper, I got my marks, and it was a high distinction, and I was proud of myself for about 30 minutes, and then I was like, but it was an 85. I was going for a 90.
Oh, yeah. God. So you... Okay.
Yeah, I feel like I fell short of something. And then the next day I saw this paper. And she was talking about how, basically she was like, okay, it was something called, the phenomenology of reading AI-generated art or something like that, which was an awesome paper. But she was talking about how, when you read something and it's really great, sometimes you can sense that there is a struggle to it. That someone has really agonized over the placement of every single consonant in that sentence, and they've rewritten it several times, and they've tried really hard to make it come across. And AI-generated words don't really have that sense of struggle because it just mimics things, how they're supposed to look. Now, I think that using it as a tool isn't bad, just as I don't think that trying to stomp on a nail is a bad thing, and I prefer to use a hammer because it's a tool, right? If someone's incredibly busy and they're just like, okay, I need to put these in a PowerPoint, whatever, because you're not that invested about it. But if you try and AI generate a book, that's a problem because you're not actually getting yourself across. And I think that I think that the only way to be sensible in regards to policing yourself and how invested you get in media consumption is being aware of the struggle of something and being self-policing, making sure you're not getting too invested and you're not getting too far off into the grass of losing your absolute mind and just being someone did make this. It's not like it's a brand.
Well, I guess it's again that idea of reclaiming the piece of work you're engaged with. Even if it was AI, if it gave you something, there's something to reclaim there and there's a story to tell. With the idea of AI, though, it's something of a tangent, but I know we don't have much time. But
I love tangents.
I came across this morning in the article, the latest breakthrough with AI has been Wikipedia for years has been tracking down, you go to a Wikipedia article, the tells for AI.
Yeah.
Right. So, the whole, either it's one extra digit or when AI writes text, it writes the following types of expression. It includes, the M dash a lot. All of that stuff has been documented by people laboriously going through AI. And the article today was saying people are using that Wikipedia resource as a prompt to get their AI to write normally.
Yeah.
Right. So it does feel like, again, the discourse being an arms race, that idea of ethical consumption versus self-surveillance, where it's again, that idea, the DNA of it seems to be secrecy still, right? How can I hide my AI, right? How can I hide the fact that I've used AI to create this? I'm using prompts, which are trying to tone down the AI-ness of it.
Which is funny because I'm currently at the Queensland University of Technology doing a thing there, and they have AI embedded within their systems that you're expected to use.
Right.
Yeah, it's similar because I just finished honours, and they're allowing a little bit of experimentation with it. They kind of well, I don't want you to generate your whole assignment. But you know what? If you acknowledge it, you can sort of use it to sort of get started. You know, as long as you come across and your argument comes across, it's fine because you're just brainstorming, you're getting started.
And would you say that's moving from a self-surveillance prohibition narrative to a collaborative ethical consumption narrative?
Collaborative. I think that's the way. I think that we don't tyrannize ourselves over what to do with problematic artists because we want to, in our hearts, we really want to just be like Jesus Christ.
Wow.
You know what I mean? We don't want to be like perfectly. We don't want to be
playing their
perfectly
bingo
ethical
game at
ourselves.
home.
But we don't be perfectly ethical with ourselves. We just want to be able to have other people look at us with kinder eyes. We want to be on the same level of other people. And I think in essence, we worry about art and what other people think about us because it's like good multiplayer in essence.
I think that's a great point to end it on.
Jesus Christ Simulator.
That's fantastic.
At home, I am Jesus Christ. My stigmata is how I feel bad about Burzum.
Thank you, Angus. Thank you, Taylor, for coming on to Media Mothership this week. I hope there's been a lot to think of. As always, show notes will be up on the YouTube and podcast. Sit back, enjoy some great tunes now on Edge Radio.
Cold.
You're listening to Edge Radio.
Now, there are a few listeners of this station that still haven't downloaded the Community Radio Plus app, which lets you tune in anywhere, even way out here. G'day, Marco.
Whoa, where did you come?
I'm just here to help you download our app. Pass me your phone.
Okay.
Now you can listen to us wherever you are, message or call the studio directly, and even share the station with your friends. There you go.
That's sweet.
See ya.
All right.
Okay.